on the play clock, gets a snap. Dolphins bringing pressure, throw over the middle. It is complete to DK Metcalf. Hurls aside one defender, stiff arms another, into the end zone for the Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown. What an effort by DK Metcalf.
Physicality on full display. This is the catch and run receiver. This is why you go in free agency and you get the big bodied man out of Seattle. DK Metcalf caught that in traffic, had a man on him, pushed him aside, sidestepped another guy, and waltzed into the end zone like he owned the place, which he does here at Acrisure.
He absolutely owned the night like the Pittsburgh Steelers. DK Metcalf getting in the end zone as part of a 4 straight touchdown drive streak by the suddenly go Pittsburgh Steelers. They beat the Dolphins 28-15, and they threw aside Miami's small playoff chances like DK Metcalf did with a defender there. That was Rob King and Max Starks on WDVE. Thanks for everyone checking us out live on YouTube. Thanks for everyone listening on Tuesday morning. I thought this was going to be a good game, Shook, and it was a good game by Aaron Rodgers for a second straight week. And it was a great game. I would even say the best of the season by the Pittsburgh Steelers. After the last 2 weeks, I'm taking this Steelers team a little more seriously. Am I overreacting?
Okay, so I don't mean to throw cold water on this, but I'm going to just slightly because I would like to point back to Miami's, I believe it was week 5 when they played the Cleveland Browns, and they completely quit. Sorry, it was week 7. They completely quit in inclement weather in Cleveland that day, and the Browns dominated them. The Browns, a bad team, dominated them. So they're not a measuring stick for a team, but that does not discount the fact that the Steelers have put together 2 very strong games in the last 2 weeks, namely Aaron Rodgers' 2 best performances as Steelers quarterback in his first and probably only season as Steelers quarterback. And they're headed in the right direction at the perfect time with this very tight AFC North race. And just a few weeks after Steelers fans were calling for Mike Tomlin's job, suddenly I think they're all back on the bandwagon. They want to play Renegade again.
That is so true. It's so Steelers. It's so Tomlin. They're 8-6, and we're going to get into the schedule and their playoff chances. And I'm thinking about, wow, they might not even need to win that Week 18 game against the Ravens because they've got the Browns in Week 17, and the Ravens have 2 really tough games, Patriots and Packers, and who knows, the Steelers could clinch in Week 17. But it would be very Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin, to look so good like this on Monday Night Football. Their 23 home winning streak on Monday Night Football is intact. And then lose to the Browns. But I don't know. Rodgers, you mentioned it. He's peaking. I thought he was awesome last week. Like, that was a legit vintage Rodgers game. 4, 5, 6 big-time throws. He played great. Tonight, I think he played great, but it was more the game management style that we've seen this year, just more effective. An average depth of target under 4 yards. So he is last in the NFL in terms of dinking and dunking. But I'm not going to fault him for it tonight, Nick, because it worked. And the 3 or 4 times where he had to throw it a little deeper, intermediate routes, it was usually over the middle, which we haven't seen a lot of. And they were on the money, and he showed off his arm strength. And it was almost a perfect night. 4 incompletions from Rodgers, and they really held the ball for most of the night.
Yeah, we saw one of those passes over the middle of DK Metcalf, which I think perfectly explained or illustrated the night for the Steelers against this Dolphins defense, which is that, look, we're going to win the battle of wills. We're going to take the ball in our hands, and we're going to break tackles, and we're going to refuse to go down. And it also, you talk about the average depth of target being minimal. Well, it helps when you have a guy like Kenny Gainwell that you can just swing the ball to out in the flat, and he can make guys miss, and he can, pick up the extra yards after the catch. It's perfectly fine to fit this within the framework of Arthur Smith's offense. You don't have to be a deep shot taking team, although they were last week. They did take a couple deep shots to DK Metcalf early. They didn't need to tonight, and they played within themselves, and that's why they were able to take a game that looked like it was destined to be a low-scoring, close affair and blew it wide open before the end of the third quarter.
Yeah, the third quarter was crazy. What was the stat you quoted to me right before we came on?
Okay, so the Steelers dominated the third quarter in a fashion that you're usually just not going to see in an NFL game. They outgained the Dolphins 163 to -20. They had 9 first downs. The Dolphins had 0. That is dominance in statistical form.
It was rough. There just weren't a ton of possessions. Both teams started out punting, and the Steelers did 3 times. But I thought Tua Tagovailoa's first interception was kind of a sign of things to come. Asante Samuel Jr. gets the pick. It's his third game as a member of the Steelers, and it was one of those double whammies, like bad decision, bad execution, and then Joe and especially Troy Aikman in the booth just shaking his head. Troy Aikman was sick of watching Tua by the end of this game. He was saying that Tua was lucky to only be leading the league in interceptions by as much as he is because he throws 2 or 3 of them every week that teams could pick off. And he's not beating the I can't play in the cold allegations. There were 1 or 2 more that could have been picked off tonight. And going into the fourth quarter, like early, it was 60 plays to 26. And Tua had so many negative plays. And they put up a couple late scoring drives and what amounted to garbage time. And even those you couldn't be happy about because Troy Aikman's making fun of them for playing so slow, like they were essentially waving the white flag on the game and the season that you can't even enjoy the garbage time unless you're Darren Waller's fantasy owner somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the production that they got in the fourth quarter really skewed the stats and made it look a lot closer than it was. It was not as close as the 28-15 final that we got. It was not. It was a very lopsided game. And you're right about Tua's propensity for throwing interceptions. In fact, it's so prevalent, ESPN ran a montage of the interceptions that he's thrown that were just easily read passes picked off by opposing defenses. Buffalo, Cleveland, tonight. You can just keep going down the list. It just kind of adds to the fact that we don't know what Tua's future looks like. And especially when you are playing in an AFC where most of the heavyweights are playing in cold weather, and Tua is now 0-6 in games that kick off at below 40 degrees, and they never look like they stood much of a chance tonight.
Wait, wasn't the stat that they had never won one like below 45 degrees, and now
they lost
I think they
straight.
won one. I think they won one at like 42 degrees, and now they moved the stat.
Yeah.
But it is sad that this could and should be the last meaningful game of the Mike McDaniel era. I'm not buying all this talk that he might be saving his job and he's got a chance to return. Like, I believe there is a chance, but it's going to be up to the next general manager. And I have a hard time believing that the ownership is going to make them keep Mike McDaniel. And just usually in those situations, the coach doesn't stick around. So I hate that how fitting it is that they come up short in the cold, because you think of so many of the big moments of the Mike McDaniel Tua era, and this is what happened. I want to get to a bit of a hot take I have on that in just a second, but first I want to give a little more love to the Steelers. It is time for Who Delivered, presented by Uber Eats, and I'm giving it to 2 men tonight, and it's the great buddy comedy of the last 5 years. Yes, it's Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator of the Steelers, and Jonnu Smith. Let's listen.
Is at left tackle here for the Steelers. Now the pitch to Jonnu Smith, and Smith off the right side and bursts through into the end zone. Touchdown, Pittsburgh Steelers. Jonnu Smith with the rushing touchdown for the Steelers, their 4th touchdown of the game.
So to add insult to injury, let's go ahead and let's go with this. Minkah Fitzpatrick, injured, traded to the Dolphins. Jalen Ramsey, a sack. Jonnu Smith, a rushing touchdown. I think the Steelers won that trade.
Oh, a little rude about Minkah there, because he's been the best player in that trade for what it's worth. But great call there by Arthur Smith and by Max Starks, too, doing our job for us and helping to point out that Jalen Ramsey had a nice night. Jonnu Smith has been in the crosshairs for Steelers fan. I couldn't believe this, but earlier in the game, he had his first down since week 9. He also had a brutal penalty and a couple of brutal blocks in this game, which has been typical for him, but he did get that touchdown. And that's when you know that the Steelers are really rolling, when Gainwell goes over 140 yards from scrimmage and Jonnu Smith is getting a rushing touchdown.
Well, I mean, this is the team with the deepest tight end room in the NFL. I mean, you have Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, and Connor Hayward, his younger brother. And you think about all 4 of those, of course, John is not going to see the field very often. He's not going to make much of a difference, but leave it to Arthur Smith to roll out a personnel grouping that you almost will never see. I just looked it up just because I wanted to check it out. You know about 12 personnel, right? 2 tight ends on the field. Usually there's a running back involved. That's why it's 12. There's no running back on the field this play. There's 6 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and Aaron Rodgers. And they run a toss to Jonnu Smith. That is the diabolical nature of what Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator who once as a head coach turned Cordero Patterson into a running back, that's what he's capable of doing. And it's just the icing, the cherry on top of this blowout cake, this blowout Sunday, that we're going to run a toss sweep to a tight end because we know that we have a little bit of revenge to earn for Jonnu with the Dolphins.
And I know you don't want to give too much credit, Shook, but if I'm going to be fair and say I'm looking for a game where they thoroughly beat a team, they've been on my radar because they've only outgained their opponent 3 times this year, Nick. That's crazy before tonight. And only one of them was by a significant margin. It was actually the win over the Browns that they had earlier this season. So they are a tough team up front. I actually think they might be a little underrated in terms of their offensive line. They can run block pretty well. They do some fun stuff. Rodgers has not been pressured too often. He gets rid of the ball so quickly. That helps them out, certainly. In fact, tonight he was only pressured, I saw, according to Next Gen Stats, 4 times. I mean, that's just nuts. And he was sacked on 3 of them. Like, he is the ultimate pressure to sack ratio king or guy at the bottom of the league, which is why, like, the way they're winning it's a thin way to win. And yet I'm much more intrigued by that Steelers-Lions game in a week. So congratulations to Arthur Smith and Jonnu Smith. That was Who Delivered, presented by Uber Eats. When football makes you hungry, get game day deals on Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. We had a question in the chat that asked, is it going to be a new coach and a new quarterback for the Dolphins? And here's my hottish take. That could have been the last time we ever see Tua Tagovailoa play for the Dolphins. Like, he could be benched as soon as Sunday. Because he's in a similar situation, I think, to where Derek Carr was a couple years ago when the Raiders benched him. Where Kyler Murray, frankly, is right now. When you know that quarterback with some guarantees on his contract is not going to be playing for you necessarily next season, maybe just sit him down. They have a draft pick there in Quinn Ewers. It's just a possibility. You have Zach Wilson. I'm not saying it's going to be an upgrade, but Tua's not been playing well at all. So I just think there's no chance in my mind that he's going to be the guy there next year, almost at all. And so possibly do they bench him early?
Yeah, this also reminds me of the Russell Wilson situation in Denver, in which they went to Jarrett Stidham for the last couple of games, because Sean Payton knew they were moving on from Russ in the offseason. And maybe that does come to fruition. I do think that this is not a move made to save a coach's job, to answer the other half of this question, because I believe that Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa are a package deal, and they will both be gone. And especially with a new general manager coming in, he's going to want to hire his guy. He's going to want to have his quarterback. Neither of the existing guys are probably his choices, whoever they do hire as general manager. So it feels like the end of an era, and an end of an era that we saw coming, 6 to 8 weeks ago, before the Dolphins went on this little mini winning streak, which they can credit entirely to Anthony Weaver getting the defense together. They held their last 4 opponents before tonight under 20 points in each of those games, and Devon Achane for running through defenses and powering this offense. Those are parts of the team that are going to carry over next year and building blocks for the general manager. You'll have some changes defensively, but Achane is a cornerstone of sorts for your offensive side of the football. I don't think the quarterback and coach are, though.
Yeah. I have something to say about like the package deal, and they have been. But first, I do want to get to a comment that say the Dolphins are terrible, but you saw Ewers playing against the Browns. How do you switch to that, even as bad as Tua is playing? You do have a responsibility to the veterans on the team to try to keep winning and all that. But I will point out one of our Throw of the Year nominees on NFL Daily that no one believed me until they watched it was from Quinn Ewers, throwing it about 58 yards down the field while getting drilled by a Browns defender, although he did not look particularly good in that game other than that one throw. I don't think they're connected anymore. My theory is that we're going to hear some blame, maybe from sources, from McDaniel. I have been noticing a nasty little game was going on when there was losing, and they threw the GM off the boat, and it felt like there was maybe like a split there, a schism between McDaniel, who has a lot of friends in the media, and Tua, and that Tua was getting blamed through the media by some just very specific criticisms that felt like it was coming from inside the house.
I think arguments can be made in McDaniel's favor. And really, the way you do that is you trace it all the way back to his roots being on Kyle Shanahan's staff in San Francisco, where they were an incredible rushing attack. And you could point to Achane's recent success and say, look, he's scheming it up. They can find success with the running game. They just need the quarterback, and they don't have the quarterback. And I can see them selling that, especially if Stephen Ross, the owner who was most likely to fire his coach a month or two ago, decided to stick with his coach when things were at their absolute worst, which was coming off of that loss to the Browns, by the way, an embarrassing showing, the second embarrassing showing of the season, week 1 against the Colts being the other one. I don't know how you show up completely disinterested in week 1, but that's what the Dolphins did. So I think if you're looking for a reason to keep him or a theory or a path for him to stay there, it's that the owner already stuck by his coach and you can just pin all the blame on the quarterback. But the problem is it's so hard to get a different quarterback. And if you hire a new general manager, you're going to have to sell that candidate on keeping the coach when that's not his coach. That's where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah, we have a call for Chad Pennington. He's not that much older than Phillip Rivers, about the same arm strength at this point. Yeah, I don't think it's even that crazy to keep Mike McDaniel because of the options that'll be out there. Will anyone be better that you could bring it? Like, I don't think it's crazy. Just history tells us it's less than likely. I think Anthony Weaver will get a real interview there and might get some interviews elsewhere. Before we move on from this game, and yeah, the Steelers' schedule is really interesting. At Detroit next week, and so that's a huge game. The Lions need
your measuring stick.
Yeah, to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they got some real defensive issues. Rodgers is playing his best ball of the year right now. I think their offense actually can score on the Lions. I don't think their defense, without TJ Watt, he missed this game and is going to be out, it sounds like, for a while. After a lung injury. We mentioned that earlier, but not on this show specifically. Just a horrible injury, a procedure gone wrong inside the building, some therapy gone wrong inside the building. And without TJ Watt and some of the problems, the speed that they have in the secondary, I think that's going to be a bit of a score fest, and it'll be fun. Let's give one more love to the old guys. Our producer, Chris Babona, not an old guy, says we got to listen to the MVS touchdown. We had a Marquez Valdez-Scantling primetime touchdown from Aaron Rodgers in the year 2025.
Rodgers under center. Gets a snap, play action pass. Looking, steps up, throws to the right, to the left, I beg your pardon. Touchdown, Pittsburgh Steelers. How about that? Marquez Valdez-Scantling with his first reception as a member of the Steelers, and it is a Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown.
And Aaron Rodgers celebrating with his former teammate from Green Bay, Red Rover, bring Marquez Valdez-Scantling over.
That was great. That was the moment where I realized this wasn't going to be like the Steelers-Dolphins game from 2007, I believe. Oh. Tell the listeners about that before we move on to our final segment there, Shook.
Well, in the history of Steelers-Dolphins in Pittsburgh, the elements usually get involved. But way back in 2007, it was a lot of rain. And the field at what was then known as Heinz Field wasn't very great. It was in terrible condition that night. So terrible, so wet, so soggy that a punt lodged itself into the turf upon contacting the turf. It's a memorable moment in the history of Monday Night Football, and it's a memorable moment, I guess, in this history of this matchup. Luckily tonight they had the field in much better shape, and it was more frozen than wet, and we didn't get another football lodged in the turf. I wish they did.
It was 0-0 with 3 minutes 55 seconds left. You know what?
Well, look at
you only live once.
In.
This is probably never going to come up on this show again. I actually want to listen to the whole call because it includes a young Mike Tirico, an aged Tony Kornheiser, I believe. And like Tirico's voice sounds a little different. Let's listen.
It might have been, if picked, a play that worked out just as well as this punt. Brandon Fields struggled earlier, got the wet ball away. Allen Rossum going to let go, and it looks like it's on a tee. Boy, if you tee the ball up, you couldn't put it any better.
I love that. That is Tirico, right? I think it's Tirico, Kornheiser, and Joe Theismann.
Yeah, it might be Joe Theismann way back in the day.
Everyone watching tonight, we love y'all. You know, there's like live YouTubes after the games. There's watch-alongs with Eli and Peyton and other various like ways to watch it. It's the best crew in the business, Monday Night Football, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. You know, appreciate what you have because it was rocky up and down over some of the years. I actually defended the Tony Kornheiser year between him and Tirico. I had fun watching that one, but there were some ups and downs in the booth over the year. Steelers, they define up and down, but they were awesome tonight, and they might just clinch this division before Week 18. We'll see. Something about the Steelers and the Ravens, it just seems like the football gods want that game to maybe be the Sunday night game in Week 18 to decide who goes to the playoffs, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe your Browns can help us out. Let's make it time for Quarterback Keeper, presented by Snapdragon. We're going to wrap up this Monday night show, like we do all Monday nights, with a little love to a quarterback that you, Nick Shook, the author, the mastermind behind quarterback keeper, has noticed is playing good ball when you went back to watch the tape. And yes, it is the quarterback of the team that one of the commenters pointed out is the best team in Florida. There is no doubt that is the Jacksonville Jaguars and their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence.
Greg, I'm going to take this moment to offer you an opportunity to, repent, apologize for your critique of my placement of Trevor Lawrence in the top 10 of the QB index.
Yeah, I won't do it because as of last week, that was too high. You're just doing it off of like what you think is going to happen?
A little bit of projection. It's not involved, but it tends to come true. It tends to come true with some of these rankings. Some might say I have a little bit of foresight on my side because Trevor Lawrence balled out of control on Sunday. I counted for 6 touchdowns. He threw for 5. He threw 3 of them to ETN. He was absolutely lights out, dialed in. Brian Thomas Jr. through the hands of 2 defenders for a touchdown, sitting in the pocket, surveying, getting loose. Nobody's open because somebody's getting held downfield. A flag is on the field. He says, forget this. I'm taking it myself down the sideline for a touchdown. This is how Trevor Lawrence has played for most of the last month, if not longer. This is what I've been watching in these Jags games that maybe a lot of people aren't paying attention to, but need to now. It's not just his arm. He's kind of shaken off the interception tendency that he's had for most of his career, and he's getting busy with his legs. And this was the peak of his powers in this game against the Jets. And yes, it was against the Jets. And yes, they've had a bit of a soft schedule as of late, but I am a believer in the Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence partnership that it is propelling him to new heights unseen since the first year that he played under Doug Peterson. And while this AFC is wide open, I caution to everybody who just counts out the Jags because they're the Jags and they play in Jacksonville, don't overlook them because that guy right there is playing some really good football. And if he's playing good football and he's got the talented core around him, they could go places. Yes. Thank you.
Great job. Professional. He stuck it to me at the beginning and he stuck the landing. The only nit I have to pick with any of that, because you were a seer, was that he's been playing like this for a month. If he was playing like that in terms of how he looked on Sunday for a month straight, I might put him in the MVP mix. I mean, that was one of the best performances by any quarterback all season long. And you look at 6 touchdowns and you think Jets, and you see a couple of the touchdowns where it's, ETN over the middle, wide open, and a screen pass. You think, maybe that was just easy and schemed up. No, he was in rhythm from minute one. You mentioned tight windows. It was every kind of throw. It was over the middle. It was some crossers to Brian Thomas Jr. It was a deep pass. And then if it wasn't for Caleb Williams' pass over the weekend, I think that shot from Lawrence when he is sprinting left to Parker Washington would get more attention.
Yes.
That's in the top 5 throws of the year. We just watched it at the end of that montage. Great job by Chris there. That's a top 5 throw of the year. No question. It is going to be, it might right now be on the podium. And everything you said was just on point. 31 points in the first half. He's running more. I really am looking forward to how he finishes out this season.
Yeah, when I watch these games, I'm obviously taking notes, but sometimes I just have some mental notes that are burned into my brain because of how great the plays are made. And I know exactly when that throw to Washington was. It was just outside of 3 minutes, or just inside of 3 minutes left in the first half. And it was one of those, there's probably 2 or 3 throws I see from quarterbacks every week that make me get up out of my chair or off my couch and just say, wow, out loud. And I said, wow. And at that point, I realized this man is playing the best football of his career. He's completely comfortable. And I'm kind of scared to see what happens to a team that runs into the Jags and doesn't realize who they're facing. Because of him, he's playing that well. He's playing that well.
They got the Broncos Sunday. It's not a great slate. The Sunday slate overall, like the daytime with the primetime games are fantastic this week. You got Phillip Rivers next Monday night against the 49ers. That's just fun. 2 teams battling for the playoffs. You have the Ravens and the Patriots. That's a great game. And Thursday nights, one of the games of the year, Rams Seahawks. But the Sunday game slate really is dry, except for that Jags-Broncos game. That is a real great test. So we'll be talking about that throughout the course of the week. But I'm excited. I think he's at another level. And it's interesting to think back to the offseason. Who are the big 2 targets in terms of coaches? Who are the 2 guys that was like they could make a big-time difference? I guess Vrabel was in that mix too. But in terms of offensive masterminds at this time last year, who could go and fix an offense? And it was Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson. They're both delivering. Like their young quarterbacks are getting better and better. Took a little longer with Trevor, but it's happening.
And Liam Cohen has overcome that terrible Duval moment in his opening press conference. That was light years behind in history now because of how they're playing. They've really done a really good job, too, of overcoming the hole that they dug themselves just emotionally from that collapse against Houston. I thought that was the beginning of the end for this team. They have responded in the opposite direction affirmatively, as in this is not going to bury us. This is just the moment where we realized we needed to reset and get our stuff in order, and they've played really good football since then. And I think another key part of this, and this is going to be a great test against Denver this weekend, Jacoby Myers has been such a great addition for this receiving core, and it's going to be a great test of how he can make a difference with them, because you're going to have Pat Surtain. He's probably going to be over Brian Thomas Jr. for much of this game, but I'm just really curious to see how well can this offense function against a defense like that, and how big of a role is Myers going to play, because he's played a big one lately.
Got a couple questions before we leave in the chat. And yes, that once again was Quarterback Keeper presented by Snapdragon. Learn more at snapdragon.com/laptops. A question, Liam Cohen, Coach of the Year. He's got it. If he won out, he's going to have a chance. There's a lot of really great candidates.
It's a really tight race.
But between him, Ben Johnson, Vrabel, I think Kyle Shanahan's in the mix. Like, there's a lot of great options right now. Another question is Tyreek Hill a Dolphin next season? No chance.
No.
I was a little surprised they carried him onto the roster this year, but that was partly because it would have been really tricky to get rid of him, and they weren't able to really have even a chance to trade him because of the injury that happened. Tua is more complicated because of his contract, but there's always a way. There's always a way if you don't want him on the roster. I just think it would be awkward if he is there as a potential backup for the Dolphins next year, and I just don't think they're going to go into next year with Tua as their starter. We'll be talking about that all offseason, like a million shows this week. In fact, while we're taking questions, I'll remind all the people watching now and listening, if you listen to it early in the morning, you can send us questions. We're doing a mailbag, holiday-themed mailbag, but also football questions on Tuesday's show. Hit the music, Chris Babona. We're getting out of here. Appreciate everyone who is here on Monday Night Football. Nick Shook, been killing it all season long. He'll be back. We have 2 more Monday Night Footballs to go before we get to the playoffs. Looking forward to those as well. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. Like I said, send us your questions on Blue Sky. On Twitter, we'll have them Tuesday. See you then.